Hi team everyone, Physio Megan here. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about the difference between injury and overload. Now, when I'm talking about injury, I'm talking about something that creates some sort of structural change to the tissue. So if I was to scan you with an ultrasound machine or an MRI, I would see structural changes on that scan. Whereas an overload would be something that potentially creates discomfort and tension, pain, tightness, achiness, for example. But if I was to image it, I wouldn't see any difference there. Now, this can be a really tricky thing to manage if you're experiencing some sort of biomechanical overload problem, because it feels like an injury. You're getting those same symptoms in terms of pain, discomfort. It's affecting your ability to continue to run. But what you will find is that we need to approach it in a slightly different way to if we had an acute style injury, something where we've got tissue damage. We might need to have some sort of down phase, some way of giving the body time to actually recover and heal. So if you have a injury where there's structural changes, you might notice immediate pain, you might notice swelling, you might notice redness, you might get this achiness, this tightness, and this is going to vary depending on the amount of muscle damage that there is, for example. But you'll probably find that it continues to get worse for at least a couple of days. You won't wake up the next day and it miraculously feel better. If there is some structural damage there, it's going to take a few days of that inflammatory process to settle down, essentially. Whereas if you find that you feel like you've pulled your car, for example, and the next day that actually feels loads better and you can carry on running, but then you get sort of 3-4 miles in and then you'll start getting symptoms again, it's more likely to be an overload type problem than it is a damaged tissue problem. And the way we're going to, the way we'd approach that would be slightly different. So the acute injury, anything where we think we've got some tissue damage, then we're going to have some sort of protective phase. We're going to step back a little bit. We might not progress running. We might just have a little bit of time off, maybe a day or two, before we then start really progressively introducing some more stress and tension to that area to load it up and rebuild. Whereas the biomechanical side of things, if we're getting this overload problem, we might be looking at a bit more about your training history. We might want to know where your fatigue point is, and we might keep you running a little bit longer, but try and understand why you're getting the fatigue there. We'll also want to rule out other things like we've talked before about whether it's neural or not. But there is a difference, because sometimes what happens is we think we've injured ourselves and we back off, and then we just go back to where we were before, and we're not quite managing the problem in the most efficient way, essentially. So it's just something to bear in mind if you are getting some discomfort in your lower legs normally, something like probably usually calves. If it is a true muscular injury, or is it an overload type problem? If you've got any questions on that, guys, please feel free to pop a comment below, send me a message, and I'll try my best to answer your questions. Other than that, happy running.